Now, some of you may have seen in the last video where I posted talking about Cookie's experience of IVDD. Unfortunately, I'm having to make this video because our other Dachshund, Choco, got IVDD. He got IVDD not long after I posted that video, funny enough. And yeah, it was quite hard for us to sort of accept the fact that now both Dachshunds have had IVDD in the same year, both required surgery and so forth. And the more shocking thing about it is that we never actually thought Choco would get IVDD. No Dachshund is immune. You always run the risk. You never know what's going to happen to your dog. Equally though, when you look at Choco, his general shape and physique is very sort of typical, I would say, for what you would expect to see a Dachshund to be. His back looked pretty strong in terms of it was straight. He's generally very fit and healthy. He's very active. He runs a lot. He loves to play fetch. He loves to play with other dogs. He's just very active and friendly. Why did I say friendly? He's not friendly. So I just never saw it. And Cookie, though, we always did kind of suspect it because of the fact that she was the smallest of her litter, for one. She's always generally been quite dainty. She did have an arch in her back when she was younger. Sometimes it's a bit more obvious now, depending on how she sits. And that's, when I say now, I mean before surgery. Whereas now, after surgery, the curve is quite obvious in this sense. So all in all, it was just a massive shock that Choco got struck with IVDD. Thankfully, Choco's IVDD wasn't as bad as Cookie's. And because of our experience with Cookie's IVDD, we knew how to handle it and how to respond. And we knew what to look out for. So that's quite important. And that's another reason I want to do these videos, just so I can explain the story about how we saw this. Because equally, Choco and Cookie's story both had IVDD, but both were very different. I am a part of an IVDD support group on Facebook. And they do, when new members join in, they ask, oh, how do you do this? How do you do this? And as much as the comment sections can show, I kind of wanted to talk about it and actually show videos to go along with it, so you can actually learn from other people's experiences with this disease. So the reason why I'm posting this video today is because it actually marks 1 year anniversary to when Choco first had his first symptoms of IVDD. Choco's IVDD happened in a slightly different way to Cookie's, and that is with Cookie, we actually had early signs of IVDD, but it was kind of like misdiagnosed to a degree, where when we went to the vets, it was thought to be something else. And it was just usually rest and so forth, back and forth, but it was never actually said as IVDD ahead of time until the point where she lost her legs. Choco, on the other hand, was very different. There was nothing to really say that he could potentially be having IVDD symptoms. Only in hindsight, when we look back, we think, oh, maybe he might have been a bit sluggish that day. But on the day that it actually happened, there was no signs at all. We woke up in the morning, we did a usual daily routine. We took him down to the park, let him off lead, and he was actually happily running around perfectly fine. And then at that point, he started running around, decided to take a wee, and he kind of went down for a squat. He didn't cock his leg. He just decided to squat down for this, which is actually normal for how Choco pees sometimes, depending where he's peeing. If he's peeing on something like a tree, then he'll cock his leg. But if he's just peeing where he is, he'll just squat down for it. But what I found strange is that as soon as he squatted down for a pee, he then decided to go straight down and lay down in his pee. And then that was a bit of a flag for me, where I thought, okay, then, well, this could be a problem. This could be IVDD. But I didn't want to panic at that point. So I tried to call him over, which he then just ignored me, which, again, not necessarily something that is unusual because that they ignore me quite regularly. But then I pulled out a treat bag and I was showing him the treat, calling him over with the treat, but he was just not coming over. That being said, he's like the most food motivated dog. So the idea of me pulling out food for him and he's not coming over to me to collect it, it was like a big, big flag for me. So at that point, there was no questions asked. I just walked right over there, just picked him straight up in my arms and carried him to my car, put him in the car, and then drove back home. At this point, it was like really early in the morning. I think it was like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. So the vets wouldn't have been open anyway. And then I then put him down outside our flat just to sort of see if he will need to go pee one more time. And then he stood up. And I thought, okay, cool. He can stand. He's got his legs back to a degree. And at that point, it actually looked okay. And then all of a sudden, his legs just collapsed on him. And I thought, no, that's it. I'm not even risking this anymore. No more tests. I'm done. Picked him up, took him upstairs, straight in the crate, and locked him in. Done. Called the vets. Need to get an appointment. Urgency, really pushing for this because I knew how Cookie's progressed so fast. And I was pushing for that appointment. Unfortunately, they didn't give me an appointment until later on in the afternoon. Choco was being locked up in the crate at that point, so there was no chance of anything sort of like making it worse from him like jarring his back through movement. It's just now at that point, we just don't know if there's something happening inside, if there's like a leak in his spine. So we just rested him. That's all we could do. Now, when we went to go see the vets, they were a bit more quick to diagnose IVDD this time around. And I'm not sure if that's because we explained to them that we've been through this process before, or the fact that Choco's symptoms seemed a bit more obvious than Cookie's, which actually seems strange to me because Cookie's to me was way more obvious. But either way, this time around, they were very much saying it is IVDD, but it's not an emergency. And it's not an emergency because he hasn't lost his legs completely. Now, I totally understand that. And as much as sort of like being a dog dad, you want, no, this is an emergency, see my dog immediately. The reality is when you look at the grand scheme of things, and if there's a dog out there, stage 5 IVDD, completely lost the legs, their surgery is going to take priority over Choco's, who can still stand at that point. Yeah, there was an intermittent sort of like drop in his legs, but ultimately if someone's stage 5 and they need surgery immediately, they're going to take priority. And I completely understand that from an objective point of view, as hard as that is to accept, because I want to be seen ASAP. But nonetheless, we got the referral. But due to the fact that Choco's stage and sense of urgency, we wasn't being seen immediately. We actually had to wait for the referral vet to call us back. Now, we didn't get our first appointment until 4 days after we first saw the vet. So therefore, his symptoms began, and then 4 days later is when we were able to take him down to the referral vet. Nonetheless, when we went down to the neurologist, we got the MRI done. Then what was explained to us is actually Choco's discs have actually dried out completely. Like every single disc is essentially dried out. If you look at, I'll put it on the screen in the scan, but where the disc is, there should be a little white marker within there to show there's something happening inside the discs. But if they're completely empty in that means it will dried out. If they're completely dried out, that means there's less cushion between each spinal, let's say, again, I'm not a medical vet, so forgive the terminology, but just say each vertebrae. And if there's less cushion in between each vertebrae, then obviously that's when the problems start causing. If they start inflaming and the disc itself, they could just burst, which is what happened in Choco and Cookie's case, in fact. But Choco's was slightly different in the sense that his disc blew in the lumbar spine, which is the lower down part of the spine. And the position where it happened, it was so far down that if anything, it would probably more affect his bladder, bowels, and tail, is what I was explained. And that's probably why his legs is intermittently failing on him. So then at that point, now it's confirmed IVDD, we were presented with 2 options. The first option is we can do conservative care. Now, conservative care would have been an option that is perfectly viable from what we were told, but the trouble is we can't guarantee how long the recovery time will be, and we'll never truly know. And it will be a situation where it could be 18 months for him to recover, but that 18 months could have a lot of pain in between. And even at the 18 month, there's no guarantee. Whereas if we opted for the surgery route, they would actually have to cut him open. They'll take all the matter out and they'll clean him out then and there. And then it'll be a matter of, say, 3 to 6 months of recovery, and then he'll be back to normal. When you're presented with 2 options like that, it sounds like a no-brainer. So therefore, we just went with it. We went with surgery because we don't want him to go through pain for 18 months with no guarantee. So there felt to be a lot more security with surgery. So he was actually back on his feet not long after surgery, and we wasn't even advised that we needed to do any physiotherapy. We just needed to ease him back into activity. So it was like 5 minutes walk at a time and building on that week by week. And then all was seeming good. And then I was saying to so many times, like between my partner, my friends, and whenever I speak to anyone who asked me about Choco, I say, yeah, Choco's back to normal, basically. It's like 90% back to normal. And I always held back that 10% because I just felt like I don't want to sort of like overcompensate in my mind that everything's perfect when it might not be. But equally, I could have been fooled that he would never had IVDD at that point. And then unfortunately around November time, things kind of started changing a little bit in terms of my perception of his IVDD. And I noticed he was walking and then his right leg just wasn't really following and wasn't acting as quick as his other leg. And I was like, oh, I hope this is not a relapse. And then I was keeping a close eye on it, but immediately put him into crate rest. Went back to the vets and they couldn't see anything major. And they could see how he wasn't really responding on his leg, like properly as a normal healthy dog. But they are aware through his medical records that he has IVDD. So they were very much like, this could have been the same from before. But as his owner, I know how he walks. I knew how he walked before surgery and after surgery and how he's walking now and how there are differences. And I can pick up on those things because I see him daily. And unfortunately, the vets can't. So I had to kind of just take my own judgment on this and actually just move forward with my sort of instinct to say that whether he needs surgery or an MRI or whatever. But he hasn't actually lost his legs at this moment. So we continue with the vet's advice with crate rest and medication. After the 4 weeks crate rest finished, we noticed his legs still not quite right after this, and we asked for a referral to the neurologist. So the new neurologist vet did their assessments. They properly checked him out physically. They checked his medical records. They checked the previous scans. And unfortunately, they were unable to determine whether this is something that has been a new development or if it's existing from the previous surgery. And that's fair because he wouldn't be able to know. Because Cookie to this day still walks a bit funny. And if I was to present Cookie to a complete stranger, they will probably have the assumption that Cookie's got something going on with her, but she doesn't. So I completely understand this neurologist's assessment, and it's quite difficult for them to assess. But for my peace of mind, I really wanted just to see what's inside. So we pushed for an MRI. We got the MRI, and the MRI did show that there was actually something pushing down on his spinal cord. he defined it as matter. So the neurologist did an x-ray, did an MRI, and there was implications that something was happening there. And that could have been some like bit of bone, he said, or calcium deposits, or it could have been just leftover matter from the first surgery that wasn't cleaned out completely. Nonetheless, the neurologist's advice at that point was to do another 4 weeks crate rest and not go for surgery. And the reason why he opted not to go for surgery is because that Choco is still able to stand. And if any dog at this position continued at this level, which to be fair, he's still looking stronger than Cookie, then they can still live a happy and normal life. And surgery, if anything, opening them up and sewing them back together, that could actually cause more problems. So obviously we don't want to do that. We finished the next round of 4 weeks crate rest and we started getting back into normal life routines after that. His leg is still not quite the same. I would say if anything it's marginally better, because when he's walking around now, it doesn't seem too bad. He seems okay, but I only really notice it now when I hold him. And when I hold him, I usually hold him with my right hand on his chest and then my left hand supporting his rear legs. And I can really feel him lifting off his left leg, which he didn't used to do. He didn't do that before surgery or after surgery, but he only started doing that around October, November last year. So I was a little bit like unsure of what's going on here, but it is what it is now because he still does it to this day, and we're now in May 2024, but ultimately he moves around and lives his life and he doesn't seem to be in any pain whatsoever. And whenever we do let him off lead in the park, he actually seems quite happy to run around. So as he seems quite happy to run around, we're actually at this point now where we're just trying to actually move on with life and continue without too much anxiety. The trouble is, when you actually have two dogs that have gone through IVDD and surgery, you unfortunately now have to live with some level of anxiety. With every single little thing that could be wrong with them, you immediately think, oh, IVDD. If they're a bit tired one day, you think, oh, IVDD. It's just crazy. But objectively speaking, when I think about Choco and Cookie, both of them, in fact, they both seem happy, healthy, pain-free, and that's all that we can ask for, and that's all that matters. So there's nothing more for me to say other than cheers for watching. If you want to keep up to date with Choco and Cookie, mostly I'm posting on Instagram, but I will keep up to date here when I can, mostly through the shorts. But if you are subscribed, then I'm sure you're going to see some level of content through here in Instagram and maybe even TikTok. TikTok is something that I'm really not focusing on at the moment, which I should, but I don't know. Too many platforms. Anyway, cheers for watching. Thank you.